Hello, hello, hello. Man, I wanted to bring that one back. Welcome to yet another episode of the Unspoken Rules podcast. I am your host, Sebastian, aka Rabid, and I am joined by the one, the only, Mr. Montana, aka Wildcard, and of course, the GOAT himself, Mr. Blake Spillers. How we doing, boys?
Good morning, Mr. Sebastian, sir. Ready to talk about the AFC North here with you today.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And as always, excited to be here, Sebastian. Thanks for asking.
Hey, man, as Montana mentioned, we will be breaking down this AFC North division. And, yeah, man, Blake, take it away as we, start with the Cleveland Browns.
Yes, sir. So going into the start of the AFC North, we're going to start off with the team that I personally think is going to win the division, and that is the Cleveland Browns. Now, before we kind of go into it, last year the Browns had a pretty successful season. They went 11-5. They competed in the playoffs, ultimately losing to the Chiefs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And going into that, I think that the Browns honestly are going to be better than they were last year. I think they didn't lose too much. They filled a lot of the needs that they needed going into that. For me, I looked at this team and I said they need secondary, they need some D-line help, and they need some linebackers. So what do the Browns go out and do? They go out and sign John Johnson. They go out and sign Troy Hill, Anthony Walker, Tack McKinley, and Malik Jackson. I mean, that's 5 players that have not only been in the NFL, they've known what they've been doing. They're vets in their own respect. But there's 3 players there that I think that are going to start. I think Troy Hill will get a start at either cornerback or safety, wherever they need him most. And then you've got John Johnson, who I think is going to also start at safety. Tack McKinley can start opposite of Myles Garrett. That defense is ending up looking very scary. And if I'm teams going against the Browns next year, this is a team I do not want to face, because this is the team that has the cockiness and the swagger that most teams do not have, thanks to Baker Mayfield. Then you have this defense that is constantly improving. I mean, last year, this was a middle-of-the-pack defense. Some games they showed up, some games they did not. But with how this defense is kind of turning out, it looks like they're not going to be middle-of-the-pack defense anymore. This defense is looking like it might move into the top 10. They had the steal of the draft by getting Jeremiah Cormall, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, in the second round. He fell the 52nd pick. This is a guy that a lot of people had going top 15 in the first round, and he dropped all the way to number 52. And considering a need was linebacker for the Cleveland Browns, I cannot believe that guy fell to him. And I'm sure that they were licking their fingers when he fell to them, because this is a guy who won the award for best linebacker in all of college football, and he's falling to the second round. That's kind of crazy to me. Along with that, they also got, in my opinion, one of, if not the best cornerbacks in the draft in Greg Newsome. This guy's a beast. He's out of Northwestern. I expect him to be almost probably a day one starter for them. And kind of going off of that, they just filled every hole that they had. They needed defense, and they went out there not only in free agency, but they fixed it in the draft as well. You're also getting OBJ back. And when it comes to OBJ and the Browns, I feel like there's a misconception. A lot of casual fans, yes, Sebastian, you know I like to use that word. I like to think that the Browns are somehow better without OBJ. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they like to look at the stats and say, Baker Mayfield was more accurate without him. The Browns won more games without him. Yes, that is true, but that doesn't mean that they're better without OBJ. OBJ is a number 1 threat, whatever team he is on. He's going to require attention over to him. He's required to have 1 or 2 guys on him at all times, which then makes it easier for every other wide receiver on that Browns team to not only have no double coverage whatsoever, but just to have easy, like the second cornerback, the third cornerback guarding him. I think OBJ coming back is that last push that the Browns need to kind of go from being a good team to a great team that contends for Super Bowls every year. And I think even though people are saying that the Browns should trade him, that's not what I think they should do. Personally, I think the Browns win about 12 games this year. They win the division. Yep. And I think this is a team that can compete for the Super Bowl. Sebastian?
No, I completely agree. One person that you forgot to mention, maybe I just wasn't paying attention, was Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney was a huge signing for the Cleveland Browns. And so just looking at the players that they lost in Carl Joseph, you replace him with John Johnson. You lose Kevin Johnson and Terrence Mitchell. You replace him with Troy Hill. And like you said, probably one of the best corners in that draft in Greg Newsome II. So it's just a very interesting fill that they made in the aspect of free agent pickups and obviously draft as well. And your boy, freaking, what is it, Joker or whatever the case his nickname is, just overall, the Browns didn't really need to do much in my eyes. Like you said, they had a great year last year. I think they have an even better one. I agree with you when it comes to 12 games, but I'm going to be safe and say my prediction will be around 11 to 6 games. But, like I said, bro, I think the Browns have the biggest upside. I think in my eyes might be the sleeper team, if that is a hot take, I guess, to win the AFC. And like I mentioned when we talked about the AFC East, I got the Bills or the Browns. Those are my two teams coming out of the AFC ultimately to win, potentially win the Super Bowl this year. They made the needs that they need, the pickups that they needed, as well as obviously filling key roles from free agency and the draft. So, they have the biggest upside and potential coming from, this offseason and going into this next year. Montana?
Okay. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here with the whole Odell Beckham Jr. here. So I guess I'm a casual fan, as you like to say. I do think that the Browns offense runs a lot better without Odell Beckham on the field. I was one of those people that were saying that maybe they should think about trading him in the offseason. Because when I looked at Baker Mayfield when Odell Beckham was on the field versus off the field, I saw a completely different quarterback under center for the Cleveland Browns. I saw a guy that was more comfortable with his receivers. I saw a guy that wasn't trying to force feed one guy to make him happy and ignore the other guys on the football field. Guys like Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, Kareem Hunt, Rashad Higgins, Nick Chubb, who just signed a new contract extension worth about $36.6 million for 3 years. I saw a guy that was much more balanced and in tune with his offense rather than trying to force feed a receiver just to make him happy at that point. And because when Odell Beckham was on the field, Baker was just forcing it to him at all times. And I just don't feel like that's a recipe for success for an offense. I feel like once he did get injured, the Browns offense completely changed and took off for the better. So I'm interested to see when Odell Beckham comes back this season, how the offense looks. Is Baker going to revert back to that old self of his, forcing the ball to Odell, or is he going to still distribute the ball to the other pieces on that offense?
No, I agree with what you're saying in the sense that Baker definitely looked better when Odell was on the field. He wasn't forcing as much. But how much of that is really OBJ's fault? I think what it comes down to is Baker Mayfield finding that middle ground of not forcing OBJ the ball, giving everyone else the ball, and I think that'll open up the offense even more. As long as he doesn't continue to force OBJ when he's on the field, I think that there's no problem with OBJ being on this team. But you kept saying he's forcing OBJ to get his mood up to make OBJ happy. I don't think that was the case. I think Baker Mayfield might have gotten to the sense that he knows what OBJ can do, and there's the sense that every ball that gets thrown up to him, he's probably coming down with. So that's why he was forcing him a lot. So I agree to that sense that if that's the case, then they do need to trade OBJ. But I think that comes down to Baker Mayfield. As long as Baker Mayfield gets it into his head that he doesn't need to force feed OBJ and that he can continue to feed all of the wide receivers, the running backs, and the tight ends, I think this offense can be one of the best in the leagues. But like you said, it comes down to whether or not Baker Mayfield feels the need to force feed OBJ down the field a lot.
I think it just comes down to just execution as a whole. They have the most potential when it comes to the most talent, I feel like, in this division. And it just comes down to execution. Are they going to execute plays properly? Are they going to run their routes properly? Is Baker going to hit, for example, OBJ on a proper curl route, slant route, whatever the case may be? Are these plays going to be ran the way they want to? Or is it just going to be a collapse of pocket? Baker's going to have to try and do his thing and then ultimately lead to turnovers like we've seen in the past or whatever the case may be. But, I mean, I trust Kevin, man. I like Kevin as a coach. I think he's going to do a lot of good things. They're finally going into year 2 with him. So I'm expecting, I have a high expectation for the Browns this year. And so if they don't succeed that, then at that point, maybe looking at this roster is something that they need to fix?
Well, obviously the offense this is Baker Mayfield's second year under Kevin Stefanski's new offense, so I'm also intrigued to see what kind of new wrinkles the offense is going to have for Baker to execute. Whether or not he has a better grasp on the offense. I believe this offensive line for the Cleveland Browns is the best offensive line in football, so there is no reason to believe here that that the Browns shouldn't have any success in this division and come out on top. There should be no another team in this division that should come close to the Browns as far as wins here. Maybe the second team could be the Baltimore Ravens, but I do believe that the Browns have made the necessary additions to compete for the AFC as a whole, and they're going to make some noise this year, and people are going to start thinking of the Browns as a super team now rather than the team that was 0-16 at one point.
No, I 100% agree. Before we start talking about the Ravens, I'm going to leave it at this. As long as the Browns continue to run the ball, they're a run-first team. I think that's all they need to do. They ran the ball extremely well last year you have two running backs that are arguably Pro Bowl running backs in Nick Chubb just signed an extension. You've got Kareem Hunt still there. Those two is probably the best 1-2 duo in the entire league. So as long as they continue to run the ball well, I had high expectations for this team. I feel like we all kind of do. Montana's saying they should win the division. Sebastian has them as a Super Bowl dark horse, and I couldn't agree any more than what you guys said. Now going on to the Ravens is the team I arguably think is going to finish second in this division. I think other than the Browns, they clearly have the most talent out of the rest of the teams left. And with that being said, they need a wide receiver. I feel like that's something the Ravens constantly need. Every year, I feel like we're talking about how the Ravens need a wide receiver, but yet every year we're continuing to talk about it because they never fix that hole. But this year, they might have finally done it. They signed Sammy Watkins. They drafted Rashad Bateman, who's a beast. He's a big-time wide receiver. That's who getting Sammy Watkins and him was huge. I think, honestly, that kind of fills their need for wide receivers as long as Hollywood Brown he's an interesting player because I think he's someone who could be really good. I think he has the highest potential maybe out of many wide receivers in that draft class that got drafted alongside him. And not only that, he's fast. You can't teach speed, and that boy has speed. A lot of the part last year, he was struggling first half of the season. He was pretty much playing on one foot. He had bolts in his foot. He just had surgery. A lot of doctors were saying he shouldn't even be out there. He battled through the pain and continued to play. And then the minute that foot became healthy, we saw a different Marquise Brown. We saw Marquise Brown, what we were expecting out of the draft, that speedy wide receiver that's a down the field threat. He can beat any linebacker that's guarding him. He can blow by cornerbacks. He can blow by safeties. That's exactly what we expected out of him in the draft. And we finally kind of started seeing that at the end of last year. And if that continues with the additions of Sammy Watkins, who's a proven vet wide receiver, and Rashad Bateman, who is one of the best wide receivers in all of college last year, I think this team could be really good next year. But what it all comes down to is how well is Lamar Jackson going to do next year? Is he going to still be sort of an inaccurate quarterback, or are we going to see huge improvements out of him? And for me, I think we're going to see some improvements out of Lamar Jackson. I think we're going to see him going from maybe a below average thrower to just slightly above average, which obviously people are listening to this and are thinking, okay, you just said he's going to be an above average thrower. That's not saying much. But for this team, that says a lot because that's all Lamar Jackson needs to be is an above average thrower for this team to succeed. Because not only is Lamar Jackson a threat on the ground, but they also have J.K. Dobbins, who's a beast on the ground as well. They have a great running game. They have a pretty good offensive line, which they bolstered even more by signing Kevin Zeitler, who's going to be a day one starter for this team. And like I said, with the additions of the wide receivers, this offense is all going to come around whether or not Lamar Jackson can throw the ball consistently or not. This defense, I think, is going to be solid like it has. This defense has been solid. I feel like every year I've watched the NFL, the Ravens always seem to have a solid defense, and I think that's going to continue on to next year. They have, all 11 guys on that team are very solid. They have a good safety core. They have a good D-line. They have good linebackers, and they just bolstered that more in the draft. I think this Ravens team I have them finishing second behind the Browns because I think the Browns are just going to be a way more consistent team than the Ravens will be. but this Ravens team definitely has a high ceiling. I think if the Ravens play the best that they can next year, this is a Super Bowl contending team. And I think that's a no-brainer for me. Sebastian?
So when it comes to the defense, I kind of disagree with you. I think for me, that's my biggest question for them, especially losing the presence of Matt Judon and Yannick, what is it?
Ngakoue.
Losing both of them in my eyes. Yes, you replaced them with Owe, the rookie that's going to be coming in, but like to have that type of expectation and that high of an expectation to replace him and put all of that like pressure on him and obviously freaking Queen, I feel it's kind of questioning to me. It's going to be very difficult for them to just fill that role. You know, Judon was a huge impactful player for them when it came to their defense, I feel like. And maybe, you know, other people will feel differently, but it just comes into, we'll see the type of expectation and the type of ceiling that he provides for that team. And yes, offensively, I agree. You know, they signed Alejandro Villanueva, Kevin Zelter, whatever you said, Sammy Watkins. They drafted my dog Bateman and a sleeper pick that I don't think a lot of people are going to really talk about. Tylan Wallace, wide receiver out of Oklahoma State. His type of his fit when it comes to being able to play as physical as he does, he's the type of receiver that I think if Sammy Watkins, you know, deals with his injuries that he always does, is going to bring you that toughness and that determination that you need and that Lamar Jackson ultimately needs from a wide receiver that he hasn't had in his career so far. He's a go up and get the damn ball. You know what I'm saying? He literally, their biggest comparison to him was Steve Smith. And if he actually comes out and has that jump ability to get up there or like something similar and just have that grit and determination like Steve Smith did, then I'm excited to see how he plays and fits well in this, you know, this roster. So I agree, you know, they have the potential to be up there in the coming years. Just right now, I have them finishing behind the Browns. You know, I said they could manage to win between 9 and 11 games. So I'll meet in the middle and I'll say they finish 10-7. Montana?
Yes, you guys mentioned all the concerns about the Baltimore Ravens defense, but some of the concerns I have are actually on the offensive side of the football. We saw last year that Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, that offensive line was beaten up, and I feel like they got worse this year. But losing Orlando Brown to the Kansas City Chiefs is a big blow for the Baltimore Ravens offensive line. Obviously, you're going to get Ronnie Stanley back this year because obviously he missed the second half of the season due to a major injury. You're going to get him back, but losing a left tackle of Orlando Brown's stature and superiority is huge. And not only did you lose him, but you sent him to the Kansas City Chiefs, the team with the best quarterback in the league on that team. So that's something that they have to contend with in the AFC now. As far as offensive line issues, is Lamar Jackson going to become a little bit more accurate? But in my opinion, in order to become more accurate, he needs to get more time in that pocket and not think about, hey, do I have to run now because I'm getting chased down by an edge defender? Because obviously we're going to know that Lamar Jackson is going to rush somewhere between 700 and 1,000 yards this year. I want to see those passing numbers go up. That's the one thing. Yes, Lamar Jackson's a prolific runner of the football, but you don't win games by doing that. You win games by using your running backs to run the football and being able to throw the ball as an actual quarterback. And obviously he did get the upgrades at wide receiver with Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman and going to Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews at the tight end position. So I am definitely looking forward to seeing how good this offense can be now that Lamar Jackson has more weapons on the squad. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is at running back. Is Mark Ingram on the team still? I'm not sure if he is.
No, he signed with the Texans.
Okay, yeah. So J.K. Dobbins and I believe Gus Edwards, is he still there too?
He just re-signed a next.
Okay, so J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are the two running backs now. This is J.K. Dobbins' time to take over as the lead running back, and I'm excited to see how good this offense can be for Baltimore. But again, it comes down to the offensive line, and that's really my only concern on the offensive side of the football.
I think Montana kind of hit it on the dot. That offensive line, it's going to be a question mark. But I think with the additions of Zeitler and Villanueva is going to be taking over Orlando Brown's spot at the right tackle position. And then you've got Zeitler, who will be a starter at the guard position. I think as long as the offensive line stays healthy, they'll be solid because I think their starting linemen right now it's good linemen. But like you said, last year they were banged up towards the end of the season and going into the playoffs, which was why that offensive line did not look like what it did earlier in the season. So like I said, as long as they stay healthy, this will be a top 10 unit in the NFL in terms of offensive line production. And you said it too, passing is the name of the game here in the NFL nowadays. If you can't pass the ball, you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender. It's just not going to happen. And we've seen great teams time in and time again have so-so quarterbacks, which result in them not having the season that they wanted. And I think this year, Lamar Jackson has no excuses. Lamar Jackson has no excuses as a quarterback as to why he can't be throwing the ball accurately and honestly for a ton of yards. You now should have a very solid wide receiving group. You have a good tight end, which you've had in Mark Andrews, who has kind of been his safety blanket his entire career. Like Montana said, they have a very good run game. This offensive line will be a top 10 unit as long as they stay healthy. So as long as that offensive line stays healthy, no excuses for Lamar Jackson this year. He needs to come out and prove why he was an MVP 2 years ago. He needs to come out and prove that he's a top 10 quarterback and that he can win games for this team and that they don't need to win games on the ground or through their defense necessarily, but that they can win games with Lamar Jackson passing the ball. Now, with that being said, moving on to the third team in this division, the Pittsburgh Steelers. This team is one of the most interesting teams in this division for me because this is a team that was 12-4 last year. They started off the season, I believe, 10-0.
They won the division last year.
Yeah, they won I was getting there. They won the division last year. They started off 10-0. They finished 12-4. But teams were kind of clowning them at the end. They were known as the TikTokers. They were losing a lot at the end of the season. A lot of people were trying to use the TikTok as an excuse that the Steelers weren't focused, which I kind of disagree with completely. But with that being said, I think the end of the year Steelers is exactly what we're going to be getting this year. I don't expect the Steelers to have that great of a year. I think they're going to be the definition of average this year. They're going to have some games where they show out and they look like a top 10 team in the league. And then they're going to have games where they come out and they look like a bottom 10 team in the league. And with the reasoning for that is they didn't have money to spend in free agency, so they didn't really add anybody in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
They had too many holes on the offense to fix. You needed an offensive line and running backs. And for me, I think they should have focused on the offensive line more because they drafted Najee Harris in the first round, which no hate on Najee Harris. I think Najee Harris is a beast, but you can't run the ball without an offensive line. Mm-hmm. Where's Najee Harris going to run the ball if he's got two guys hitting him in the backfield? How is Ben Roethlisberger going to throw the ball downfield if he doesn't have time to throw the ball? And to me, that's the biggest problem with this team. Yes, they added two offensive linemen in the fourth round and in the third round, but are they going to be day one starters or are they going to be day one impactful players? Mm-hmm. Maybe they potentially could be, but I see these guys as kind of projects, guys that could be starting in the future for this team, which is why I kind of think that this team is not going to have success, like I said, that they had last year. They don't really have a true number one receiver. That's no offense to Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he's a very solid receiver in the league. But I think last year and the year before that kind of proved he can't be a number one receiver in the league. He's a great number two receiver, but he needs someone else to take the attention off of him for him to put up big numbers like we kind of saw in his rookie year. Now, Chase Claypool is a very good receiver as well, but he's kind of in the same boat as Juju. I think it can be a number two, number three borderline receiver, but he can't be a true number one. And when you don't have a true number one receiver on your team, you can only have so much success, especially when you don't have an offensive line. You have an aging quarterback that's never been mobile. He's kind of been dealing with injuries, which, I mean, that's just what it comes to when you're playing in the league for so long, taking so many hits as Ben Roethlisberger does. So for me, I think the ceiling for this team is like 10 wins. But I have them more around 8 wins. I think they're going to finish 8-9. They're going to finish third in the division. They won't finish worse than the Bengals. We're not going to get carried away with that. They're not the Bengals. They're not nearly that bad. But with that being said, I think the Steelers are good. Like I said, are just going to be a very average team this year. They're not going to be a gimme team. They're not going to be a bye week for anyone per se. They're not going to be an easy win. But they're definitely not going to be a hard win. I think this team is just, like I said, they don't have that high of a ceiling. Now, the floor, though, this team could fall apart. I could see this team winning about 5 games this year and just not playing well because you don't add anyone in free agency. That's huge. When you don't have any money, when you have a so-so draft, there's only so much you can expect out of this team. So with that being said, Sebastian, what do you think?
I have a lot of things, but not really a lot. Just very subtle questions, I guess, in a sense. Like you mentioned, Big Ben, he's old. I guess they're just gonna rely on Big Ben's ability to just be their quarterback for God knows how long. And they drafted Najee Harris, I guess, and it's very surprising to me that they let four. Well, I guess not let one retired and Marquise Pouncey. Then you lose David DeCastro, Alejandro Villanueva, and Matt Filler. And I guess, yes, majority of them were old and sure, whatever, move on. But to only bring in Trey Turner and then draft 2 linemen in the 3rd and 4th round, it's very astonishing in a sense. I don't understand their mindset. Oh, we have players on our roster. We're just going to go next man up and just believe in them. If that's the case, then I guess we'll see how it goes this year. But I completely agree. It just doesn't make sense in my head why they go with Harris when they literally have no O-line. That's number one. Number two, they brought in my dog Melvin Ingram. He was supposed to come to Miami. Screw it, have fun in Pitt, I guess. I don't know what you're going to do over there. But it's just this team, in my eyes, with their schedule, being very tough, I don't see them improving too much. Or actually, I don't see them improving at all. I have max. This is a phenomenal year, as if they win 10 games. But my prediction is 9-8, solid 9-8. But I wouldn't be surprised if they finish 7-10. It's just the way that this team did absolutely nothing because they had no money and they lost so many people, either to being retired or legitimately just losing them. It just blew my mind. And maybe I'm just not a fan of the Steelers as a whole, but they got a lot of questions, to fill, in the sense of having an old-ass quarterback in Big Ben and not taking advantage of trying to find a successor.
Yeah, Ben Roethlisberger, in my opinion, the Steelers are going to finish last in the division.
Oh, my Lord Jesus Christ, Montana.
Just because of the concerns that you laid out.
Montana.
And also, I don't believe in that hot take that you said that none of this Pittsburgh Steelers receiving core are 2 receivers, because I believe all 3 of them can be number 1 receivers. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster. All of them could be number 1s. The fact is, this is probably one of the best receiving cores in football.
You're telling me you think Deontay Johnson can be a number 1 receiver? I can understand Juju and Claypool. I'm not going to disagree. I could definitely see it. But
Deontay Johnson balled out last year.
Too many drops, dude. It's called consistency. To be a number 1 receiver in the league, you need consistency.
Listen, hold on.
I think that will iron itself out.
Really quick. I forgot to completely mention this in my take. And I know you both might like this. They also drafted a tight end in the 2nd round. God knows how to pronounce his name. Pat Month, whatever. His comparison is Tyler Eifert. And if that's true, then I can see.
Bad. Tyler Eifert was a good tight end.
I think Tyler Eifert's a great.
He was a hooper coming out.
But Tyler Eifert never played.
Okay, but if that's true, I can definitely see this squad being nice and winning potentially 10 games. But that's all. I'm going to leave it at that. Continue, Montana. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, I still believe you have 3 of these guys. If you take 2 of them away, one of them is obviously going to be a number 1 receiver and get over the 1,000, the catches, the 1,000-yard mark. I do believe Juju Smith has the capability of doing that. I was honestly surprised that he chose to go back to Pittsburgh over Kansas City in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I was surprised that he did. Obviously, if he would have went to Kansas City, the sky would have been the limit for that guy. God knows what kind of numbers he would have put up with Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. But he decided to come back and play with Ben Roethlisberger, which I do not think that's a smart move, because I do believe that Ben Roethlisberger is not going to have a great year this year, just because I don't believe he can throw the football anymore. I don't think that arm strength is there. Obviously, we saw it towards the end of last season. The guy literally is falling apart before our very eyes. I believe that he should have just retired this season and let the Pittsburgh Steelers figure out their quarterback situation in the future going forward. You add Najee Harris, but like you said, the offensive line is a completely new offensive line. God knows what the hell is going to happen with that line. Najee Harris is going to have a hard time running the football this year. I believe they're going to use him a lot more in the receiving game also. But that's Ben Roethlisberger is going to have to run for his life again this year, and that's not a recipe for success for a guy that is, how old is he now? 36, 37?
Man, that man's like 50.
He can
Seems
barely
like it.
move. He's had major elbow surgery this maybe not even a season and a half ago. We saw last year that the arm strength isn't there like it used to be. Ben Roethlisberger used to have a cannon of an arm. The guy can't throw the football for his life now for some reason.
I think that's a hot take.
I believe that we saw it last year. We saw what happened to him last year. He couldn't throw the ball downfield
The
at
biggest
all.
problem with the Steelers last year, though, was that they were expecting him to throw the ball 45 times a game. That's the problem. The main problem was they weren't running the ball because they couldn't. Ben Roethlisberger had no time to throw the ball downfield, so that's why they ran slant routes all the time because they had a bad offensive line. I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is necessarily a bad quarterback. He's definitely not what he was, which is why we're not seeing the same success. But that doesn't mean that he's not a good quarterback anymore. It just means that they need to run the ball more than pass the ball because they can't expect you don't see Tom Brady throwing the ball 45 times a game.
They just got to balance it, bro. They're not balancing it at all.
They're not
balancing it at all, and it just comes down to a lot of things. Their O-line, and we could have this discussion, but it's going to take like 45 minutes, which we're not going to do. But there's just too many things that they're not doing right offensively. Even if they added all, whatever the case may be, it's just too questionable.
They have the weapons.
It's just they have the question.
Yeah,
yes,
but
they have the weapons.
Mean nothing with it can't get them to them.
But what are they going to do?
Yeah, I'm saying that's why I'm saying they're going to finish last in this division. That's why I'm saying.
I don't think defensively. Last. I think we'll talk about that's what we're going to do, bro.
Defensively, they have the pieces to be a really good top defense in the league. They have T.J. Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. Obviously, you mentioned Melvin Ingram coming into the squad now. Defensively, they have stars on that side of the football, so obviously they're going to be able to put together a solid defense to compete. I'm just really – the offense is just concerning. Ben Roethlisberger concerns me. I do not think they crack any more than 6 or 7 wins. As you mentioned, they have a really, really tough schedule. They have to play the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns each twice. I do believe all 4 of those games will be L's on that schedule. So on top of that, they have to play a bunch of other teams. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I don't believe Roethlisberger and the offensive line is going to be good enough this year to be able to put the Pittsburgh Steelers in contention for a playoff spot. And I do believe as we'll get into in a second, the Cincinnati Bengals will finish right ahead of them in 3rd place in this division. I know that's a hot take as far as that goes.
You're smoking crack.
I don't know if you guys want to get into the Bengals or if you guys have anything else to say about the Steelers.
There's nothing else we got to say unless you got something, Blake.
I'll say one last thing. The biggest thing was they were predictable. The Steelers became predictable last year. I heard a lot of opposing coaches saying that they knew what to run defensively and the Steelers didn't adjust to it, which was, for me, as long as the Steelers become less predictable, they could definitely contend for a playoff spot. They just added another playoff team this year. So for me, I think you only have to go about 9-8 probably to make the playoffs. But I think the biggest comparison, the Steelers remind me a lot of the Washington football team this year. I think both of those teams are almost like they're identical to each other in a lot of ways. Their wide receiving core about the same. Quarterback situation, I think the Steelers probably still have a better quarterback situation. Running back wise, the Steelers have a better running back, but the Washington football team, will have a better run game this year just because their offensive line is better. But I expect both of those teams to finish with I guess I shouldn't get into that because I already destroyed the Redskins too much in the last time we talked about them. But yeah, I think the Steelers won't be as bad as Montana is making them out to be. They're going to be a very average team. They'll finish with 8 or 9 wins. Now I know Montana wants to talk about the Bengals first, so Montana, knock it out.
All right, so we got the Cincinnati Bengals. I believe this team they went 4-11 and 1 last year. Obviously, Joe Burrow went out towards the second half of the season with a torn ACL. He's coming back this offseason. I believe they've given him the full clearance to participate in football activities. He will not be playing in the preseason, which I'm completely fine with. Terms of oh my gosh, I can't even speak. In that moment, that's the right decision for the Bengals to do with their franchise quarterback. I'm a really big believer in Joe Burrow as a quarterback for the future of his career. I believe that he has every bit of the intangibles it takes to be a winning quarterback. Some additions, some of the issues that they did not address entirely were the offensive line that, of course, that we saw last year became an issue that caused Joe Burrow to tear his ACL, but they did sign Riley Reiff, an offensive lineman. They also signed a bunch of they also drafted a couple guys, I believe, if I want to say. Yeah, they drafted Jackson Carman, an offensive tackle in the second round. They also drafted Deontay Smith, another offensive tackle in the fourth round. But the big prize for this Cincinnati Bengals team was being able to draft Jamar Chase with the 5th overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft. I believe this guy is the next big receiver in the NFL. I believe he's the next Julio Jones. What do you mean? The guy, him and Joe Burrow and LSU in their final season together were dynamite together.
Yeah, but you're also failing to realize him and Joe Burrow and LSU had probably one of the most prolific O-line. Now we're going into the Cincinnati Bengals team with a horrible ass O-line. This team is literally going to be probably one of the worst, the bottom feeders of the entire NFL with a 5-12 finish. Calling it here first.
5-12 finish.
5-12
I wouldn't
finish.
say 5-12
finish is what I'm calling, bro.
But 5 wins is being
still,
generous.
hey, man. Hey, that's what I put at the. That's what I put. I said my best guess is between 4 to 6 wins, but nothing higher. I'm gonna be a little nice here and give them the 5-12.
5 is generous. Put it this way, Montana. The Bengals showed us what kind of organization they were when they drafted Jamar Chase instead of P. Sewell with that first pick.
Talk to him.
Do you want to protect the future of your league, or do you want Carson Palmer 2.0?
Get to that.
Do you want Carson Palmer 2.0? Because Carson Palmer,
Joe Burrow,
when he got drafted, when he got drafted to the Bengals, he was supposed to be the next coming of Jesus. He was supposed to be the next elite quarterback in the league. But guess what happened? Tore his ACL because he had no protection. Constantly battled injuries throughout his career at the Bengals because guess what? They couldn't give him time to throw the ball, which resulted in him being nothing more than a slightly above average quarterback. He had good years. Carson Palmer had good years. Look what he did at the end of his career with the Cardinals. The Cardinals gave him protection for 1 year. He goes to the NFC Championship game. The Bengals should have looked at their past and said, we messed up with Carson Palmer. How do we not mess up with Joe Burrow? And what do? They make the same mistakes. They go out and draft Jamar Chase with the 5th pick instead of drafting the best offensive lineman in the draft without a question. There were people that were saying P. Sewell should go number 3.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that he definitely shouldn't fall out of the top 5. And when the Bengals had the opportunity to draft him, what do? They screw it up. They draft Jamar Chase. But that doesn't mean I don't think Jamar Chase isn't a beast, Montana. When I made that noise, you're just comparing him to Julio Jones before he even takes a snap on the field, which is a little ridiculous to me. Let's see what he does in the NFL before we start comparing him to Julio freaking Jones, one of the best receivers in the league still to this day. But yeah, I mean, their biggest problem is offensive line. And what do? They sign a below average offensive tackle in Riley Reiff. That's no offense to him. He's a borderline starter. You draft Jackson Carman, who is a good offensive tackle in the second round.
Hold on.
That's added to Jonah Williams at left tackle.
Hold on. With Jackson Cameron, I have little stats here. Daniel Jeremiah ranked him at 96 prospect, the 96th prospect, and they took him at 46. Instead of, and they had him at listen. They had him at 38th pick. That's not all position, but that's beside the point. They had a 38th pick, which they traded down with the Patriots, which you had Liam Etchenberg and Tevin Jenkins available. But instead, what do? They trade out to get future first, I believe, from the Patriots, and eventually, ultimately, reach for a damn O-line in Jackson Carman. Now, does he have the potential to be great? Sure. Will he be a quality starter? Maybe. It's a lot of questions when it comes to the idea of building your O-line. Yes, I love Jamar Chase. The man, should have been a damn Dolphin. Oh, we can say all this crap, you know what I'm saying? Whatever. He's a phenomenal wide receiver. The man will have a phenomenal career, but it will not be in Cincy. I wrote in my notes, I said, hold on, let me find it. I said, I think Jamar Chase. Listen.
His career.
No. I said, I think Jamar Chase wastes his talent and career in Cincy. I hope to see him leave later on down the road, but this just won't be the same as LSU days with Joe Burrow. Now, Joe Burrow is a phenomenal quarterback, but without an O-line, We have seen time and time again struggles from him and struggles from that team as a whole, whether it's injuries, which ultimately led to Joe Burrow tearing his ACL. And we're just going to have to – it's just a lot of questions in the air of what we're going to see. Is Joe Burrow going to have to escape the pocket? Is he going to have to roll out? Is Jamar going to be able to get open?
That's his game anyway. He runs anyway.
Okay. But he doesn't – he's going to have to run every play, Montana? You're telling me he's going to have to run every single –
That's not true.
That's a question.
You guys are making this offensive line seem really worse than it actually is.
That's what we saw last year.
What the hell are you –
They drafted 2 offensive linemen. They signed an offensive lineman free agency.
One of which could be
they have Jonah Williams at left tackle. What are you talking about?
Bro,
the only thing that you could say that you have an argument saying that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be bad this year is saying that the defense is probably going to be really bad this year. That's just not that. Obviously, the offense is going to be.
They made some good defensive pickups. First of all, second of all, no, their main problem this entire time has been O-line, and they didn't take care of it. If you're putting in average O-line, and that's no disrespect to anybody that's on the squad. You're putting in average O-line to protect Joe Burrow, your franchise, your freaking love of your life. What do you expect from them? What do you expect? They can't run the damn ball. They can't run the damn ball. They're going to have to throw 50 damn times, which is the same problem. Montana, please tell me who their running back is besides Joe Mixon.
No, Joe Mixon's a good running back.
Who's behind Joe Mixon?
Doesn't matter. You don't need anyone behind Joe Mixon because Joe Mixon's going to be the 3-down back.
And if he gets hurt?
He hardly ever gets hurt.
What if this O-line doesn't protect Joe Mixon like they didn't protect Burrow and got knock on wood, because that'll be my pickup in fantasy. Knock on wood, this man Mixon somehow gets hurt. Because he dealt with injuries. Don't sit here and tell me he hasn't dealt with injuries. Yeah, the man has dealt with injuries.
Right. He had injury towards the end of last year, but the Bengals were out of contention anyway. It's not like they had to force him to play.
It doesn't matter. He still battled injuries. The problem will be that O-line. If that O-line does not get resolved, which it didn't, then we're going to completely see the same team 5-12, maybe even being nice there, and it might be even worse. It just comes down to how are they going to protect Joe Burrow? That should be the question, and they didn't fulfill that. And that's the problem here. And it is what it is, bro.
Some of those
issues. Okay,
I don't think
with that being said, I looked it up, and PFF said with keeping Jonah Hills and their center, and after the draft, being generous, they're ranking them 24th in the league in terms of offensive line group. So that's bottom 10. So you still have a bottom 10 offensive line, regardless of if it improved or not. It didn't improve enough. It did not improve enough, and that's what Sebastian's kind of trying to say here. He's saying even though they had made some additions to that offensive line, it didn't improve enough to the point where I could sit back and say, I feel okay about Joe Burrow being back there and sitting back in the pocket. And not only that is, when you look at their schedule, if they would have been playing a bunch of defenses that don't have good pass rushers, it would have been one thing. They would have won more games for sure. If they would have been playing bottom defenses, this team could win 6 or 7 games. But the problem is they're playing arguably on their schedule, they play each of the top 10 defensive line groups in the league. You have the Steelers, who we all know, even though we just talked about
start with the first 3 games. Start with the first 3 games.
Have one of the best defensive fronts in the league. You have the Bears, who arguably have one of the best defensive fronts in the league. You've got the Packers, who, even though you don't want to talk about it, the Packers have a top 10 defensive line in the league. Then you go and play the Ravens twice. The Ravens have a much improved defensive line. Even though you said they lost Judon, they did still add
their line is nice.
A couple pieces. Mm-hmm. You play the Jets, who, even though it's the Jets have a much improved defensive line. That defensive line is going to be freakish next year. You play the Browns, who have Myles Garrett, one of the best, if not the best, edge rushers in the league. You play the Chargers, the 49ers, Denver's going to be a sleeper team this year. That defense is going to be elite again with Von Miller coming back. I mean, you look at this schedule, and these are teams that are going to destroy the one weakness of that Bengals offense, which is that offensive line, which is the main problem here. Joe Burrow is probably not going to play all 17 games, I don't think. I feel bad for the guy because I want Joe Burrow to succeed. I think he's a really good quarterback who has all the intangibles to be a good quarterback in the NFL. But the problem is with what happens to a lot of problems or players in the NFL, it's the situation you get put in. If you get put in a bad situation that doesn't fit your strengths, well, you might not have the career that people thought you would have. And with Joe Burrow being the number 1 overall pick, people are expecting him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league off the start. Look at these quarterbacks. You have, if you're looking just in terms of production, quarterbacks in their second year. Lamar Jackson won the MVP. Patrick Mahomes in his second year, first year starting, won the MVP. Justin Herbert in 1 year broke every single rookie passing record, starting not every game and also having a bottom 10 offensive line. I think Joe Burrow is not even the best quarterback in his draft class. So with that being said, looking at this schedule, I know you're going to hate this, Montana, but I see the Bengals winning probably 2 or 3 games this year.
Holy crap.
I see them winning 2 or 3 games. Montana, you're
muted.
on mute.
You're muted.
They're not winning less games than they won last year.
Yeah, why would they? They have a horrible defense still. You still have a bottom 10 offensive line. Like that was their biggest look. If you look at their biggest needs, they needed defensive front and offensive front. They didn't fill any of those needs. They just went and drafted based on things that they thought looked good on paper. Jamar Chase looks great on paper with Joe Burrow, but he wasn't the right pick. That's my problem with the Bengals organization. They're not making the right decisions in improving this team, which is why they're going to only end up winning 2 or 3 games. Because this team, look at the teams that are best in the league. Good offensive line and good defense. The Bengals don't have either of those things. So I just don't see them winning more than 3 games this year, 3 or 4 games. Yes, if this offensive line miraculously plays well, sure, they could win 6 or 7 games. But you could say that about any team in the league. If the Bears' offensive line plays well, if the Miami Dolphins' offensive line plays well.
What's the difference between the Bengals' offensive situation and the Pittsburgh Steelers' offensive situation? Because
the Pittsburgh Steelers' offensive situation, they have players that have proven themselves in the NFL already. Other than Najee Harris, you have T. Higgins 1 year in the league. You have Tyler Boyd, whose whole career has been known as A.J. Green's second player. You have Joe Mixon, who's a solid running back, and you have Joe Burrow, who's played about 5 games. 3 really good. I don't know what it is with you and the Bengals, but 3 really good receivers. Come on now, come on.
You telling me that T. Higgins is a bad receiver?
No, he's just a very decent receiver. Decent, not very good. He doesn't do anything.
Receiver.
He could be very good.
This year.
I think you're just looking at the potential of these players, though, Montana. You're looking at what these players could be.
Wait, let me interrupt you, Blake. Last year.
Blake, let me interrupt you really quick. I'm telling you,
rookie season.
It comes down.
If you would have had Joe Burrow last year for the whole entire season, T. Higgins would have been 1,000-yard receiver.
Yeah, but he was getting garbage time.
Hold on. This man, Montana, is coming into the mentality of every NFL talk with his connected franchise owner mindset. I'm telling you, bro. I'm telling. Why?
I see what I see. I see talent on the
Montana. How many franchises have you done with the Bengals?
None. Because you don't want to do a franchise.
That's cap number 1. That's cap number 1. That's a lie. But it was okay.
Oh, no one wants to watch connected franchise.
It is what it is, bro. Okay. First of all, that has nothing to do with this podcast. That's number 1. Yeah. Number 2, you've talked about. Yes. Okay. You talked about how you absolutely love the Bengals and you were instantly going to do one with the Bengals and this, that, and the third, and that you were praising Joe Burrow and all of this good stuff.
Oh, Joe Burrow is the next Tom Brady.
You're looking at potential rather than looking at ability when it comes down to time that Joe Burrow will have to throw the ball. Period. Plain and simple. Whether he rolls out,
ain't gonna have time to throw the ball either, bro.
It doesn't.
Which is why they're not
matter,
good.
Montana.
But what do
they're
the
both going to
Steelers
be
have
ass.
that the Bengals don't? The Steelers have a top 10
Bengals are going to be better than the
defense.
Steelers.
The Steelers have a better defense, Montana.
That's what you're forgetting.
I don't care.
Look, I'll agree.
Hot
I'll
take.
agree
I'm
that
calling
it's
it right now. Bengals are going to have a better record than the Steelers. I'm calling it.
That's a hot take, number 1. Number 2, I low-key like the Bengals additions defensively that they made with Trey Hendrickson, Larry Ogunjobi, Mike Hilton, Chidobe Owazi. I love him. Ricardo Allen. I mean, sure, we can look at Eli Apple. It adds depth and whatnot that they needed and so forth. But at the end of the day, if you compare that defense to the defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think the Steelers have the slight edge. Now,
I think it's not even close.
I'm not gonna be toxic here. I'm just gonna say it. It's a very slight edge. It's reasonable. It's close because they're both gonna be They're gonna both be ass teams. In your eyes, you have them going 3 wins max. In my eyes, I have them winning between 4 and 6, 7. If they win 7 games, it's a phenomenal year. Phenomenal year for the freaking Bengals. Phenomenal. But I mean that's where I'm wrapping that up. You know what I'm saying? I got them.
That's where I actually have them around there. I have Pittsburgh around 4 or 5 wins because I just don't believe in their.
So we're the opposite.
I don't believe in Ben Roethlisberger. So
No,
I
I
believe
feel
more
you.
in Joe
I
Burrow
agree.
than I believe in Ben Roethlisberger.
Okay,
Which I
if you
can
take the
agree with
offenses
that. I can agree with that.
If you say that both offenses are going to be about the same this year, which they probably will, in terms of production, these offenses are going to be very similar in terms of how many points they're scoring. And you look just on the defense. The Steelers, I think going into the year, they're ranked third in terms of team defense. The Bengals, I don't know what they're ranked, but I guarantee it's bottom 10. Yes, they made good additions. I don't hate their secondary additions, but the problem with their additions on defense is the secondary wasn't the main problem last year for this team.
At all.
The main problem for that defense last year is no pass rush, very below average linebacker play, and that's what they needed. And what did they do to fix that? Nothing. They added some defensive linemen in the draft. I'm not going to act like they just completely ignored that. But these are guys that are third, fourth, fifth round picks that are not going to be day one starters. And if they're day one starters, that just shows you how bad that defense was in the first place.
So
go ahead, Sebastian.
Let me just interrupt really quick, and I apologize for continuously doing this. Montana, let me just name you some notable players on the Pittsburgh Steelers team, and and then I'll name some Bengals players, and you tell me which team sounds like they have more potential. All right. So we have your boy Stephon Tuitt. We have Cameron Hayward, T.J. Watt, Devin Bush, Joe Hayden, Terrell Edmonds, Minka Fitzpatrick, Cameron Sutton, and Melvin Ingram. That's the Steelers' defense. Now we look at the Bengals' defense. We have Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader, Larry Ogunjobi, Trey Hendrickson, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis Gather, Trey Waynes, Von Bell, Jesse Bates, Chidobe Awazi.
Mike Hill.
Mind you, no, Mike Hill's he's a backup. He's a backup. According to this depth chart.
That's a good backup.
Okay, and that's perfectly fine. But I just named you the starters.
That's depth. I like the Bengals secondary more than I like Pittsburgh secondary. I can tell you that for sure.
Oh,
so you have all-pro Minka Fitzpatrick. You have
all-pro Jesse Bates.
You have one of the.
I'll give you that.
Minka Fitzpatrick. No, I agree. Like I said, the Bengals secondary is solid.
Yeah, I like their.
But if we're talking about if we're talking about complete team defense, the Steelers, their front seven alone.
I just named you disgusting linebackers and edge rushers and freaking.
Yeah, you could say that Pittsburgh has a better defensive line and linebacker crew, but I like Cincinnati secondary also.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. But what wins you? Listen. Montana. What wins you ball games? Defensively, what wins you ball games?
If you don't have people that can cover the football, you can't win.
Okay, Montana, but if you can't stop the run, which if you look at their schedule, they're going to be facing a lot of run-heavy teams. That's going to be their issue. That's going to be their problem. I mean, we could talk about this for 30 years, so we'll just continue, Montana. What you want to talk about?
I think I've already said my piece, and you guys have said your piece. So
no, yeah, I think that definitely kind of like that's getting towards the end of the episode. But with that being said, I think we're definitely gonna have to get a poll out there on the Twitter, maybe on the Instagram, saying who finishes with a better record this year, the Steelers or the Bengals, and we're gonna see what the community thinks on that. Montana's hot take that the Bengals are gonna finish with more wins.
What?
Hot take there. So the community isn't as smart as me. So
here we go.
We'll see, man. We'll see. I know that if I had to pick a fantasy quarterback, I would have picked Joe Burrow.
Okay, and I completely agree.
And that's why you're not winning fantasy.
Time out. I'll pick. Hey, I'll pick Burrow.
Fantasy football king, bro. Hold on. Fantasy football king.
I'll pick Burrow over Ben Roethlisberger. I agree.
Okay, but neither of those guys are getting drafted in my league.
I know. 100%. I ain't touching that.
With the receiving core that Cincinnati has, I would draft Joe Burrow.
Oh, and that's what, Montana, you're questionable for this year as being a fantasy king, brother. There's no way I am taking Joe Burrow. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, I guess when we all play fantasy football this year, we'll see who comes up on top.
I'll take Joe Burrow as my backup, maybe as like a undrafted.
Undrafted, exactly.
But hey, with that being said, I think that's gonna wrap up this episode. Unless you guys have anything else to add on the division. But with that being said, I think we kind of all agree, though, that at least with the Browns, I think we all agree that the Browns are going to win this division, right? I think we can all.
I don't know, man. Montana started out the podcast saying he had the Bengals winning that damn thing. So I don't know, man.
When did I say that? When did I say that? You can go find the record
you said the beginning of the podcast. The very beginning of the podcast.
Maybe it was just a joke. Find it on the playback, bro. I said the Browns were going to win.
Maybe it was just a joke, brother. Maybe it was just a joke. I'm just saying. Continue.
All right. But anyways, I guess we should just end it by
I'll
saying
take it
thank
out.
you. Yeah, Montana, go ahead and take it out.
All right. If you guys haven't already, follow the Apple Podcast and Spotify. Leave a rating and review. If you guys are watching us on YouTube later, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a comment. Like the video. As far as that goes, you guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Wildcard Movies. Sebastian, where can they find you?
Rabbit FL everywhere.
And they
Blake?
can find me at Blake Spillers on everything.
That's going to do it for our division preview of the AFC North. Our next division preview will be the NFC North.
Oh,
Green
boy.
Bay Packers, Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings, and Detroit Lions. I know there's going to be a lot of fireworks going on
Jesus.
Oh, yeah,
in that
sure.
talk. We'll see what happens there. But that's going to be it for Unspoken Rules number 33. We will see you guys next time.
See you guys.